let's talk about Killing Time. Well, specifically, let's talk about how nobody's talking about Killing Time. A game that, despite the industry experiencing a second golden age of retro shooters, finds itself stuck in a game bundle alongside Corridor 7 and Operation Body Count on some overpriced GOG bundle. I mean, like, seriously, what the fuck, Ziggurat? Just because you bought the rights to them in exchange for covering someone's bar tab doesn't mean you gotta treat them like leftovers. Have some class. Anyway, consider this not just a review, but the documenting of a game project that could very well have been an outrageous disaster, consigned to a console now known best for softcore pornography, that deserves to be spoken of in the same breath as build engine classics. Originally developed by Studio 3DO while the console was still attempting to stay afloat while all their original developers jumped ship to Sony or Nintendo, the console version of Killing Time is, well, to put it charitably, oh god, it's so bad! I really wanted to do a side-by-side breakdown of both versions, but after spoiling myself on the PC remake, the 3DO version was impossible to put up with. Slow, ugly, and cramming far too many functions into the console's limited controller layout, you could hear the game Killing Time wanted to be just screaming to be let out. This isn't to say that the original game wasn't totally without merit. Rebecca Heinemann, an industry veteran who had already ported Doom and Wolfenstein 3D to the console, drew upon a lot of that experience with build to write Killing Time's engine from the ground up. In an interview with her and another programmer from the PC rebuild, Mike Litinsky, she explains that while the 3DO was underpowered in some ways, freedom from build allowed the team to pull off some technical wizardry that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. The way in which maps transition almost seamlessly, the fact that enemy placement persists between visits, I mean hell, the simple fact that they nearly got room over room working at all thanks to Heinemann writing a new engine that could do more than what build was offering at the time. To do all of that, then to essentially do it all over again in order to get it working on the PC is nothing short of heroic. Unfortunately, the remake isn't without its share of technical troubles either. Hard-coded mouse movement eliminates circle strafing, which, although not crippling, still leaves much of the run-and-gun combat feeling unnecessarily stilted and awkward to pull off. The occasional crash to desktop was to be expected of any 26-year-old game running on a modern system, but something about the sound layering in-game causes the otherwise great score to completely cut out until you load a new area. Nonetheless, I do recommend you go and check out the interview on the Conway Estate fan site via the link down there in the description. As an insight into the development of Killing Time, it's fascinating to see how the team managed to bash together a workable product in such a short time while somehow managing to rebuild and overhaul just about every part of the original game at the same time. I'll dig into some of the major differences between the two versions of the game as we continue, but for now, sit back, sip on your preferred Prohibition-era cocktail, and welcome to the Conway Estate.
Upon this time-trapped isle, where time has ceased to be, if you must know why, you'd better pay heed to me. This is a place so cruel, across a darkened sea. You would be a fool to come and challenge me. You never will escape, no matter what you try to do. If you try to run away, we'll turn you into barbecue. Don't stand around and wait, no one will listen to your cry. You will meet your fate while on this time-trapped isle. This is the end for you, you never will be free. You won't have a clue for the rest of eternity. This is a place so cruel.
Playing the role of an otherwise nameless Egyptology student, we begin on the trail of an ancient artifact known as the Water Clock of Thoth, an artifact rumoured to bestow eternal life upon its owner. The commissioner of the dig that unearthed it, Tess Conway, is a well-known Egyptophile, and yes, that is the term for it, go and look it up, and sure enough, upon arriving at the estate, it becomes pretty clear that she's been messing with forces beyond her ken. Goddamn flappers, always overreaching. In this case, she's managed to set the island adrift in time, trapping everyone who was on the island at the stroke of midnight in a limbo between life and death. Well, at least the people with speaking parts do. The estate's legion of groundskeepers, chefs, parlour maids and clowns have all instead turned into undead monstrosities hell-bent on shuffling off that pesky mortal coil. Well, maybe not the clowns. Honestly, I think they're just acting on their natural homicidal impulses. Naturally, being a mere academic, we turn the boat around and no. With that second thought, we pull a trusty 45 revolver from our jacket, snag some extra ammo from the boat's interior, venture down the pier, and oh shit, a ghost!
I'm gonna need you down at the dock tonight. We're expecting another shipment of arms.
Well, boss, where am I gonna put all this stuff? I mean, the storage room is almost full. I can't even walk in there.
Guess you'll just have to stash it around the grounds.
You'll be getting much of the plot conveyed to you through these in-game FMV sequences, where the ghostly remnants of the Conway household relive their final days on the island. Now and again they'll speak to you directly, but more often they'll instead be busy acting out the myriad plots, betrayals, and upper-class verbal sniping that you'd expect at the nouveau riche. Allegedly, these videos were more compressed and got cleaned up for the PC version, though to be honest, the video quality in the PC port looks fucking awful, whereas the audio quality and overall detail on the 3DO version is significantly crisper and more consistent. I dug around in the in-game files, and to my surprise, the videos are absolutely identical in quality between both versions, so this must have something to do with how the engine renders the file in-game. The slick prick in the suit is Duncan DeVries, a sleazy bootlegger who thinks he's onto a good thing with Tess, using her estate to stash Prohibition-era booze and firearms away from the prying eyes of the law, while he tries to pry his way into her pants. It's a surprisingly simple and verisimilitudinous way of explaining away all the caches of guns and ammo we'll find around the grounds of the estate, not to mention the legions of Tommy gun-toting undead mobsters that make up much of the cannon fodder at this early stage. Along with him is his dubious partner in crime, Mike Murphy. Not much more than a convenient stooge, he's pretty much here for comic relief, and a good example of how the acting on display may not be Oscar-worthy, but it understands the tone that the game's going for.
Ah, knock it off, Mike.
Sorry. I just hate to see a beautiful dame go to waste.
You think I'm beautiful?
Are you kidding? You are a goddess. You are like a moonbeam. You're like the stars. You're like scrambled eggs.
At first, we're left with nothing more than a revolver to fight our way to the estate proper, relatively weak and slow firing, but it benefits from Doom-style single-shot accuracy. Explore upstairs and fight through a few undead gangsters, however, and you'll find a second revolver hid behind this wall. While some later weapons like the shotgun and Tommy gun drop randomly from specific enemies, this is one of the few rare places where you can actually grab a second pistol early on, and if you want to conserve your ammo, you'll really want that option. I mention ammo conservation because Killing Time isn't your standard linear level-based FPS. The aforementioned seamless map, stretching from the myriad gardens and outbuildings to underground faux Egyptian tombs, hosts a finite amount of resources. You can, and in my playthrough I came perilously close to doing this, run out of ammo completely before you reach the endgame. There's a reason why I've come to consider this game a marriage of retro shooter design and survival horror. Some locations actively have little to no resources, but are absolutely swarming with enemies standing between you and the key items you'll need to progress. In practice, this did lead to me and many other players making tedious supply runs back to areas more flush with ammo, but as those resources dwindled, the tension did begin to ratchet up. Hunting down secrets isn't just advisable if you want an easier time, they become vital to making steady progress. Adding to the resource management is the matter of staying alive in the first place. Rather than first aid kits or food, in Killing Time we regain our health with glowing balls of life essence that you'll either find floating around the estate, or, more commonly, beat them out of your enemies. Blue orbs heal about 20%, gold orbs heal something closer to 50%, and the red ones... Yep, sometimes enemies drop anti-health orbs. It makes attempting to save ammo with the crowbar a little more risky, since although you technically have enough reach to kill an enemy without automatically grabbing the orb when it spawns, the back and forth dance of melee makes this a lot harder in practice. There is a third way to get more health, but we'll get to that later. With two bloody great handfuls of 45 spitting justice, we can now carve our way through the gardens between the dock and the estate itself. Immediately, it's clear to see just how much more the devs had to work with on the PC versus the 3DO. Wide open spaces with trees, fountains, an actual sense that this is a real location and not some cheap tourist attraction built to shuttle you from A to B. This first section where you're fighting through what looks like some kind of reception area has so much going on already. A wine cellar, a dining room, and even a kitchen with actual furniture, albeit furniture that looks like it was made with Duplo. Even doors. Well, kind of. In the 3DO version, doors actually swing open and shut as fully animated objects. Here, it seems that the team tried to get this to work, but couldn't, as the closest we get to these static props for open doorways. Later doors open vertically, and, they work fine in the Doom kind of way, but it's clear that some things just couldn't make the jump from console to PC. Cutting through the crowd, we arrive at the main grounds of the estate and come face to face with Tess Conway, the eldest surviving member of the family, though perhaps surviving is a relative term at this point.
Help me. Help me. Please. Gather my spiritual essence from the different symbols which lie around this island.
Your first view of the mansion is perhaps the clearest sign that this transition from console to PC afforded the devs not only more processing power, but the means to realise a much more coherent and striking vision. You descend these steps and take in the vast scale of the building, lights burning in distant windows against the cold night sky, dense floral gardens and a large fountain occupy the immediate grounds before it, populated with undead gardeners and hidden stashes of Duncan's hardware. And this is what you get on the 3DO.
Who lives in a house like this?
As much as I may be out here aiming to suck Killing Time's dick at every opportunity, it can't be ignored that there's so much more to the PC version versus the original console release. So many ideas they were able to properly articulate once they had the tools and resources to actually express them. Killing Time feels genuinely cinematic at times, managing to squeeze incredible set pieces out of little more than good level design and superb sound design. Before we can explore the mansion itself, we're going to have to find an invitation to Tess's little shindig. The estate's butler, Robert Kenilworth, is such a stickler for manners that he'll bar our way in until we find one.
I'm afraid you'll need an invitation. This is an exclusive party.
Let's get this out of the way before anyone else says it first. The minimap isn't very good. On the 3DO, the map is split up between locations, but at least it lays it all out pretty clearly. On the PC, we've got this. The whole island crammed into that top centre portion of the screen, then a heavily zoomed in minimap just below that. While the level design itself is good enough that you'll really find yourself lost, apart from the fucking maze, the way this is laid out screams, it works and that's going to have to do. It's offset somewhat, especially in these extensive outdoor locations, by the simple use of this dirt path texture. These winding pathways connect each key location to your main pathway through the area, ensuring that you're never more than a few seconds from getting your bearings through landmarks and rough geography. This may sound utterly trivial to gamers who are used to waypoints and minimaps, but this stuff is so easy to do badly. Bear in mind that at the time, most first-person shooters had more in common with blood-soaked labyrinths than real-life locations, so for Killing Time to not only go for realism, but to make each location naturally easy to navigate is honestly beyond impressive. To lay our hands on an invite to the Apocalypse Ball, we're going to have to shoot our way through the kennels, which, as you might expect, are home to a horde of bloodthirsty hellhounds and their masters, the Gamekeepers. The hellhounds are your first real threat thus far, zombie gangsters and gardeners going down easy enough from a couple of bullets. Hellhounds, on the other hand, zigzag their way into melee range, often in packs, and at close quarters can tear you apart in a few seconds. The pistols are already outclassed at this point, so you'll probably be busting out the shotgun for these guys. As far as the shotgun itself goes, it's fine. It's the workhorse of any first-person shooter, and Killing Time is no exception. A similar design to Doom's pump action, the spread is tight enough to stay useful at moderate ranges, but loose enough that hosing down a crowd will still work well enough. The lack of some kind of super shotgun, or double-barreled alternate version, is unfortunate, but honestly not worth missing. Sometimes less is just as good as more. While you probably snagged it from the reception area before you arrived at the mansion, the shotgun also drops as a standard item from the Hellhound's companion enemy. Red-eyed and stalking you from the brush, they may not be as much of a threat as their hounds, but that husky laugh is going to haunt my goddamn nightmares for some time to come. The lodge itself is the first real taste of the close-quarters gunplay you'll get inside the mansion itself, and it's suitably hectic. Maybe not quite to the standards of the then-released Duke Nukem or Blood that released the following year, but still packed with enough gamekeepers and unexpected packs of hounds which, as if I wasn't to piss on the 3D version enough, are fucking two-headed poodles in the console version. Again, that's kind of funny, but they look like shit. With the RSVP in hand, we can return to the mansion and finally enjoy the hospitality of the Conway estate in earnest. And by hospitality, I mean sustained attempt to tear me a new arsehole.
Welcome to the Conway Estate.
The main hall of the mansion serves as both a main hub for our travels within and outside of the building, as well as a chance to meet the rest of the cast and lay out some of the relationships at play. Lydia Tewkesbury, resident lush and acidic gal pal of Tess, pops up predominantly to trade barbs with her friend to play the more acerbic kind of comic foil. 6 out of 10, parties too hard due to a lack of self-respect. Tess's niece Angela manages to subvert the creepy little girl trope before it actually got traction in gaming just by acting like a normal, albeit cryptic, kid. She pops up now and again to provide rhyming hints as to what lies ahead without the faintest hint of asking for us to play with her forever and ever. 8 out of 10, probably really into Goosebumps. Seems like a cool kid. Finally, we have Byron Fleming. A chronic simp and fellow Egyptologist, his knowledge of ancient rituals is only met by his inability to see through Tess's manipulation. 10 out of 10, perfect cinnamon roll, absolute husband material. Through viewing these ghostly interactions, we start to get an idea of how to undo the fuckery that Tess has wrought upon the island. The ritual itself required Tess to place her essence into several winged vessels which could then be spread around the estate, only for her reluctance to get chopped up to do so, resulting in some magical fudging of the numbers. As such, to break the curse, we'll have to find all the winged vessels Tess used to conduct the ritual, returning her essence to where it all began. Look, the joke just makes itself, alright? Said vessels double as collectible power-ups, with each providing unique benefit on demand, but each vessel only gets a single use before needing to be recharged. To keep it simple, you can pretty easily split the vessels into two groups, those that are useful and those that aren't. Vessels such as the hands, liver, back, chest and arms provide you with your classic FPS boosts. The hands grant you unlimited ammo for about 30 seconds. Not enough to wipe a whole area clean of enemies, but extremely useful in the late game when you start running dry at crucial moments. The liver is a room-clearing smart bomb, not dissimilar to another item you'll lay your hands on later. While it shows up pretty late into the game, it's a nice ace to have in your back pocket when you need a lot of things to die real quick. The back and chest are perhaps the two most essential, God mode and a health overcharge respectively, though it's worth grabbing the chest as soon as possible, as the boost it grants permanently doubles your health pool to 200%. The final vessel that you really can't afford not to use is the arms. Doom's Berserker pack in all but name, providing you with a small health boost and temporarily multiplying your crowbar's damage output by 8. It's not as flexible as, say, Quake's quad damage, but when you absolutely positively have to beat a room full of eldritch horrors to death with 2 feet of steel, except no substitutes. Sadly, the rest of the vessels aren't anywhere near as useful. The legs grant you super speed, but it's hardly a challenge to outpace any of the enemies you come across, so it mostly becomes a tool for making backtracking less tedious. The others, ears, eyes, nose and mouth, all simply add new details to the map, which, as I already went over, isn't too useful. If the map was a little more zoomed out, or if the highlights could be seen in-game, then they'd be a lot more useful, but as they are, they add very little to the game itself. On top of collecting all these vessels, you'll also be hunting down an assortment of keys to open up the myriad doors which wall off certain parts of the estate. More often than not, they're pretty easy to spot, if not access, but this first one... fucking hell. So, the guest bedrooms are a simple symmetrical location, just one huge grid of bedrooms all linked via 4 main hallways and a couple of intersecting corridors. You can, and in my playthrough actually did, miss the very fact that there's a key here at all. To find it, you have to look in one specific room out of dozens of other identical rooms for this switch, hit it, then return to the central area, hit this switch, then this switch, then this switch, before finally revealing the key. It never gets quite this bad again, but this is still an unnecessary dick move. And speaking of being a dick, the zombie maids aren't a problem. The sexy vampire maids really aren't a problem, as they don't actually aggro onto you unless you attack something near them, but these little shits. These spitting bugs are the game's first real introduction to some enemies having resistances to certain types of damage. Bullets and shotgun shells will bring them down eventually, but given their numbers and ability to hit you from a distance, exploiting their weakness to fire is absolutely goddamn essential. You'll find a flamethrower at our next port of call, so in all honesty it's probably worth waiting until then before coming back and getting the key, just to avoid the headache of having to clear them out without it. The flamethrower, alongside the first vessel of my playthrough, is out here to the northwest, up at the lighthouse. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I literally do it every... This desolate little corner of the map is home to the game's first real foray into platforming, and it has to be said, it's not great. Maybe the way in which the game runs on modern machines, but jumping and killing time feels more like teleporting straight up for a nanosecond. If your timing isn't on the money, you'll either fruitlessly hump the edge you're trying to scale, or plummet just short of the platform you're trying to reach. Thankfully, there's really only a few places where you have to make these jumps, and the lighthouse's platforming section is forgiving enough to give you a route back to dry land should you fall off your perch. What's less forgiving are the giant fucking wasps. I'm not sure if someone on the Killing Time team just has a real hatred for bugs, since every variant you come across are perhaps the most dangerous goddamn things you encounter. Being airborne, they have no problem zipping in through windows or across otherwise impassable gaps at the first opportunity, and once in close do about as much damage as the dogs, which is to say they'll fucking obliterate you in seconds. Thankfully, by this time you'll have picked up the Tommy gun. Although it draws from the same ammo pool as the pistol, the SMG fills the role of your panic gun. You walk into a situation you're not ready for, whip out the Thompson and hold down the trigger until the bad people go away. So, naturally, I use it whenever these fucking wasps showed up. Inside the lighthouse itself, which is another beautiful example of how good the set dressing in this game can be, just look at these toilets. Look at them! We lay our hands on the flamethrower and some Molotov cocktails in the basement. The flamethrower is actually better than you'd expect from a game of this era, with a long reach and serious damage output that can mow down hordes of enemies in seconds. Even its thirst for fuel is offset by how easy it is to find in most locations. The only real drawbacks are its wide projectiles being easily blocked by the level geometry, and the fact that the burning corpses of your victims can actually damage you if you walk over them too soon. The Molotovs are a little different, travelling in an arc and leaving a burning patch of floor that enemies can walk into, causing a pretty amusing loop of their flinch state. And actually managing to handle quite well once you've got an eye for their range, just don't shoot them. Molotovs and flamethrower ammo are the only pickups in the game that you can accidentally destroy with a stray bullet. It's a mutation on a mechanic from the 3DO, where certain crates could either be opened up for ammo or shot to make them explode. It was a pain in the arse back then, and it's still a pain in the arse now. If you see a room full of bottles, just back up round a corner and wait for any enemies in there to come to you. The lighthouse is also home to a couple of new enemies. Alongside the undead gangsters, you've got their bigger, meaner, and thicker counterparts, the Hulks, who pretty much exist to absorb punishment while their buddies shoot you from a distance. They're a nuisance, but the award for biggest pain in my arse so far has to go to the giant skulls. They're big, red, spit fireballs, and are, skulls. They never have the decency to show up in groups of less than 4, and they can go down fairly easily, even a single close-range shotgun blast can do, but they shit out relentless streams of fireballs if you can't break their line of sight. I rarely outright panic when fighting these guys, but their placements and numbers guarantee that anytime I fight them, I'm not getting off easily. The skulls also feature in the East Wing, the first location I found a key in-game, and perhaps the first real example of someone on the design team not doing their job. The clowns, yeah, spooky, but I'm hardwired to attack clowns on sight, so they don't really creep me all that much anymore. Though the version they use for the 3DO is some fucking John Wayne Gacy, Pennywise kind of bullshit, and I'm not a fan of that. That weird blood balloon thing that happens when they die? Nope, die now, please. Anyway, design. So this place is already kind of a maze, full of tight corridors and alcoves where clowns can ambush you along this one kind of large room where if you walk through the centre here, it opens up a secret room full of skulls, which, is nice in a fuck you kind of way. The problem is that the key you're looking for is stashed behind these columns with no clear indication of how you're supposed to get to it. Instead of, finding a switch or solving some kind of puzzle, like you'd imagine you would have to, you've instead got to interact with this pillar, which looks identical to all the others, which then slides out of the way. I know I called out the hidden key in the guest bedrooms as the worst example. At least here I can see that there's a key at all, but the lack of any form of hint acts as more of a roadblock than a speed bump to progression. At the far end of the East Wing, you'll find the ballroom, where we can check out some more ghostly vignettes and, if we interact with the clock, actually get a chronological timeline of events. Tess has been playing everyone like a fiddle for years, duping Duncan into funding her obsession with the paranormal, stringing along Byron's affections for his expertise, and generally keeping Lydia around as a drinking buddy. It all plays out like a darkly comic twist on Frasier with some cosmic horror elements thrown in there for good measure, and if anyone wants to take the ball and run with that, I'll settle for a 5% cut of the net revenue. From here on out, we enter Killing Time's main gameplay loop, exploring and unlocking new locations within the grounds and assembling our pots of bathwater as we prepare for a final confrontation with... well, I won't spoil it just yet. What keeps the loop from growing repetitive is the sheer level of variety and creativity, both in terms of environment and the roster of enemies. For an example, let's take the kitchen. The simple way in which the devs use kitchen counters to form this half-height maze, ensuring that you can't just run straight by the enemies within, is a simple yet smart change to how these fights would normally play out. The kitchen's layout limits your movement just enough to make the chef's projectiles much harder to dodge than if you were fighting them in the open. Each location manages to not only feel genuinely distinct, but marries itself with the enemies that populate it, harnessing their strengths and ameliorating their weaknesses. Hellhounds and gamekeepers have a home field advantage of the obscuring brush to mask their approach. Flying insects exploit their maneuverability to cross impossible gaps. Nothing in here ever feels lazy or simply randomly slapped together. On top of the variety and level design, Killing Time's soundtrack is equally as varied and absolutely packed with bangers. What I'm saying is, I really fucking love this game's music. It's clear the score was written not just to sound cool while you blow away enemies, but to actually match the pacing and tone of each location, and establish the right kind of atmosphere. Case in point, the kitchen's theme is this strangely drum and bass-like mashup of synth chords and this pots and pans percussion that sounds like it's been lifted from a hip 90s cooking show. Alright, at least that's how it sounds to me. This area splits off in a few directions, though most of them are closed off to us for now. That odd-looking doorway in the corner of this storeroom is something to remember for later, as we'll be coming back to it then. For now, we take these stairs down and begin the first truly punishing part of Killing Time, the wine cellar. The cellar itself is absolutely massive, an interconnecting hub that branches off towards several other sub-locations, though more than anything what you're going to notice is that there's simply not enough ammo down here for you to clear out all these hulks, wasps, and a new addition to the crew, these undead Temperance League folks. The manual states that Tess locked a bunch of them in the wine cellar after they were caught snooping around the estate, so it's kind of darkly ironic that their chosen method of attack is to yeet wine bottles at you from a distance. You fucking hypocrites! Lucky for us, the cellars also contain one of the few rare caches spread throughout the game where you can fully resupply. Unluckily, this one's behind another showcase of the dev team's programming chops, a recursive box maze that keeps teleporting you back to the start. Persevere though, and you'll wind up getting access to not only plenty of ammo, but the final tool in your arsenal, the Ankh. Being the only outright magical weapon in the game, you would expect the Ankh to be pretty powerful, which it is. Acting as single-shot smart bombs, much like the liver vessel, you won't find too many of these just lying around in the open, often finding them instead in one of the myriad secrets within the estate itself. Instead of a last-ditch panic button, they work pretty well when you just want to nope out of a big room of monsters without wasting ammo. Yep. Nope. While we do find a key down here, at the other end of this bridge puzzle, we're going to be taking the secret exit back where we found the Ankh. Unless you're willing to backtrack to a cache back on the surface, it's better to bypass these enemies than fight your way through them. Take a right and follow the stairway down into some kind of pump room where Byron and Robert are enjoying a bit of quite literal toilet humour.
I say, Robert, you haven't been meddling with my specimens, have you?
What specimens were these, Mr. Fleming?
In particular, my dung balls.
You mean those little clots of manure?
Those clots of manure, as you call them, were once pushed by the scarab beetles of Amun-Ra.
Well, they have ample followers now.
Why do you say that?
I dispatched them to the sewer.
Would you get me a plunger, Robert?
The sewers are, memes aside, pretty well done for what they are. Despite being dark and somewhat complex to navigate, the ambience is absolutely spot on, and once you have your bearings, backtracking through them is incredibly easy. The only real problems standing in your way are these scarabs, the result of Byron's antique dung balls getting flushed down the loo, and these, for want of a better word, shit monsters. The game calls them giant spitting toads, which is, I mean, I'm no biologist, but what kind of fucking toad looks like this? All of this isn't helped by the fact that at this point you'll be down to scant handfuls of ammo, forced to either employ the flamethrower in short controlled bursts, or try your luck with the shotgun and pray that the RNG is on your side. While I couldn't confirm it for the PC version, I know that the 3DO version of the game had a mechanic not dissimilar to critical hits, where one shot could instantly kill an enemy. In practice, I found that while for the most part enemies and I dealt reliably consistent damage, there were moments where I'd get suddenly obliterated by a single attack from near full health. Ultimately, I put it up to the intrinsic jank of running an old game on a new system. Unfortunately, jank or no jank, this was also where my cavalier approach to burning through ammo was starting to catch up with me. My reliable caches out in the gardens were tapped out, and I still had the hardest parts of the estate yet to plough through, with nothing but a pocket full of shells and sheer grit. And I've got to admit, it felt fucking great. Accessed via the sewer, the Temple of Isis is another pretty stunning example of how much the developers managed to rebuild Killing Time into something visually impressive. This long, narrow walkway takes you out into a tiny islet just beyond the coast of the estate, where I guess Tess just outright commissioned someone to build her a working replica of some pharaoh's tomb, death traps and all. As you enter this main atrium, the vessel ahead of you drops down into the vaults below, and these monster closets open up, unleashing a beefier version of the skulls, these masks of Anubis. They're a little tankier than their bony brethren, but their projectiles are slower and generally easier to avoid. I popped an Ankh here in a vain attempt to save ammo, which ended up achieving nothing since there's so many fucking skeletons down here, oh god! Obviously there's going to be skeletons in this kind of game, why wouldn't there be? Their 3DO counterparts actually look pretty cool as they wander around chain-smoking cigarettes between hurling fireballs in your direction. The PC versions are clearly on the nicotine patches, since they're far more focused on the task of blasting you in the face with balls of flaming death than lighting up a Marlboro light. Clear them out though, and you'll finally access this tomb well below the temple and grab another important vessel. The unlimited ammo you get from the hands isn't something I used an awful lot, much to my own loss, but that was more down to me grabbing it a little late into the game. My advice is grab it as early as you possibly can, and it will make clearing out the late game areas significantly less difficult. The West Wing is like you took a cheap Carnival Funhouse maze and then set it on fire. Then pumped it full of skeletons. And clowns. And angry flatulence. It's not a good time. In fact, it was so bad on the 3DO that it's what caused me to give up on the playthrough altogether. It's significantly more bearable on the PC, what with the improvement to controls, but you'd better brace yourself for some Romero-level dickishness. The long and the short of it is this. Navigate through a maze, or a switch puzzle on the 3DO, then tiptoe along these narrow ledges over vast flaming pits while skeletons and the aforementioned angry ghost farts do their best to knock you off. Falling isn't an instant death, yet somehow that ends up somehow being even worse, as you're now having to struggle with a lack of mouse aim to figure out the right way out without burning to death. My advice, just save scum your way through it. Work your way through each room methodically, it'll take longer, but I assure you it's a lot less stressful. Grabbing the key located at the end of this causeway, you'll now be able to exit close to the library, our next port of call, and oh god damn it, more clowns! The library itself is actually pretty small and simple enough, featuring another one of those interesting doors we'll return to later on. While we're here we can pick up some more exposition, mostly Byron having some real sad hours while getting flirted at by Lydia. My poor sweet boy. You deserve so much better. Mwah! Blast a few more gangsters, snatch another vessel, and grab this key that unlocks a few more locations we've already seen but have been able to access till now. First of all, let's hit up the last major outdoor location, the Hedge Maze. While the rest of the game has been fairly sandbox-like for this kind of first-person shooter, the Hedge Maze is more of a straightforward gauntlet, where little Angela is on hand to provide us with clues as to which door to open. At each junction, two doors will open into dead ends, or monster closets, while the other will lead to the next junction, but it's actually often worth exploring the whole maze just to dig up extra supplies. Plus, the texture quality is so low that I often couldn't tell what I was picking until half a dozen angry landscapers were trying to prune my head from my shoulders. I mean, oh well, that's why God gave us shotguns. It's worth noting that there's a couple of traps the game drops on you here. This Ankh baits you into a flaming ambush full of zombie gangsters, whereas this white vessel spawns a huge cluster of damaging red orms between you and the exit. It's hardly Plutonia levels of fuckery, but it's an appreciated tap to the sack that at least shows the dev team knows how to keep the player on their toes. The final key we locate at the end of this maze is what'll take us to the endgame area, but due to the way this video's laid things out, mostly due to my own incompetence, we're actually missing half the vessels we need to activate it. And that means only one thing. Holy shit, I forgot just how much backtracking you have to do in this game. It's possibly the one thing I could really understand getting in the way of anyone enjoying Killing Time, because if you go into this expecting a straightforward first-person shooter, you're going to be in for a nasty shock. Maybe a quarter of the game is spent simply navigating around the map to previously locked off locations or scavenging for supplies, and you know what, I get it, that's not going to be for everyone. Thankfully, these locations are, mostly, pretty brief, and since this review is now hitting 16 fucking pages, I better start wrapping this shit up. It's not like it's been over a month since I finished the game or anything. No, I actually wrote that a month ago and it's now more like 2 months. Look, I've had a lot of shit going on and this is like the third rewrite of the review, just accept that I'm slow. The one location you can actually get to from the start of the game, the Arboretum, is worth making the push to early on to snag the arms, Killing Time's equivalent to the Berserker pack. I'd also like to admit here that I really didn't use the vessels as much as I should have, and when I did, I ended up wasting them in stupid places. For example here, where I tested if a vessel gave me invulnerability by, using it when there were no enemies around. Look, you know I'm stupid, just let me make mistakes. It would have helped if the vessels were more intuitive to select and use, but getting mad at the UI design for a game made for the 3D fucking O is like getting mad at gravity. It is what it is. The lookout tower and the second floor of the East Wing aren't too much of a challenge at this point. Nice long hallways and open rooms populated with your lower tier enemies. It's cool to again see that the game can pull off some interesting set dressing, with the East Wing looking like it's been retrofitted into some kind of secret banquet hall come speakeasy with crates of contraband stashed in the back rooms. It's the last two locations that are really going to fuck you up. The topiary isn't strictly a tough location. It's populated mostly with bugs and turd monsters, but opening the store late into the game when ammo is slim? Yep, that's a room worth nuking. Below the topiary, down the secret elevator in one of the pools, is this little area with said turd monsters and, of all things, a platforming section. Yay! Well, until now the jumping was janky, but at least functional enough not to be a serious problem, this section requires you to hop over a couple of platforms and stand on this switch. If this was a build engine title of the time, this would be simple. It is not. The caverns are another location where you can clear out like 90% of the place before finding the right key, so approaching this section early on when I was flush with supplies wasn't too bad. Killing Time manages to pull off a decently cramped and creepy underground section here, where every turn hides another skull or bug lying in ambush, alongside these Muppet-looking things that I'm told are meant to be ghost demons? Ooh, so spooky. Okay, that's almost all the vessels. Now it's time for... oh, shit. I've danced around this long enough. The mausoleum is possibly the most brutal section in the entire game. Even before you can open up the building itself, you're swarmed with scarabs, spitting bugs, a literal graveyard full of skeletons and stay-puffed boogeymen, and it doesn't get any better once you're inside because this place is dark. Locations like the caverns were dark, but in such close quarters that nothing really had a chance to sneak up on you. The mausoleum is nothing but huge dark spaces full of enemies that'll either blast you from a distance or bomb rush you the moment your back's turned, and for the love of God, don't take the bait and drop down here. There is no winning here, just grab the vessel and run like hell before you're completely swarmed. It's the one place where Killing Time really does sell itself as a horror experience, and while it's a little disappointing that the rest of the game hasn't matched this level of tension, it's still a great high point to go out on. We head back to the mansion through this final doorway, where Tess makes an attempt to convince you that she's the victim.
Finally. You have gathered together enough of my spirit so that I can communicate, but we must hurry. This entire island is trapped in time. Some, like myself, are spirits without a body. Others were less fortunate. They roam the island, poor, hapless zombies. No one can rest while the water clock exists. You must go quickly to the attic and destroy the water clock.
Somehow I don't buy it. In Tess's bedroom you can actually view a few more ghostly flashbacks. There's also these swanky portraits of her inner circle, though by now you're hopefully wise to our leading lady's fuckery. Take the secret passage up to the attic behind Duncan's picture and place the vessels in this convenient altar. Nice! Now...
I am now the Avatar of Set, ruler of the night. Your soul belongs to me.
oh hey Duncan, you're looking swole as fuck, man. What's your secret? Oh, he's dead. Anyway...
Time has no meaning here. You are damned for eternity.
oh fuck. Assembling the vessels lets Duncan loose, now possessed by the god Set, as an immortal shit-talking revenant who has one job: to teleport behind you when you least expect it and smack you about like a ragdoll. Conventional weapons will only put him down for a little while, burning ammunition you'll desperately need since it's now time to rush back around the mansion one final time to destroy 6 other Egyptian water clocks that are protecting the main one used for the ritual. While I noted how good the music has been thus far, special mention has to go to this new track that plays when you're accessing these final hidden locations. A driving synth beat that gives you this final countdown vibe, that gives this last section the second wind it needs to feel fresh and urgent despite the several hours of gameplay you've already sunk into it. I mean, credit where it's due, even the original 3DO version benefited from some absolutely banging level tracks. By this point in my playthrough, I really was making a mess of things. I was saving my vessels for last-ditch situations and wasting far more ammo than I really should have. Even doing my best to dodge Duncan, the sheer volume of enemies was gradually depleting all my reserves. Each of these locations also terminates in a location with a great view of the mansion. Another little touch to this late stage of the game that could have easily not have been there, but somehow makes this whole section feel like a goodbye to the locale we've grown so familiar with over the course of the game. Still, all 6 clocks are busted. We return to the attic to destroy the final clock when...
You. I should have killed you when I had the chance. I'm such a fool.
And this is why you don't stick your dick in crazy. Tess puts her axe down and offers to thank you for releasing her spirit from its torment, which is nice, I guess. You know, if you're a complete fucking idiot. In the 3DO version of the game, you actually have no choice but to fall for Tess's scheming bullshit and end up getting torn apart by her minions, which is an absolute fuck you to the player of such proportions that it's no wonder that when it came to remaking it, the devs went, you know what? Fuck this. So instead, we're going to take on an impossibly powerful sorceress imbued by ancient Egyptian magic with a pocket full of shotgun shells and a crowbar. And we're going to fucking win. Forget using the Ankh, she's quite literally immune and will literally laugh at you if you try to use one on her. Between summoning endless floating skulls and the fact that once you're in here, you're stuck, it can be very easy to come into this fight totally unequipped and unprepared. However, if you're just as much of a certified ass-kicking Egyptologist as the game has led us to believe, we're not going to let a little thing like impossible odds get in our way. Unload into her with everything. Pop your invulnerability if you've got it, pop your health boost. She still won't go down. Pop the arms, your last-ditch berserker pack, and fucking wail on her with the crowbar so fast that you instantly kill the skull she spawns. Lock out with them dropping extra health orbs until finally, she goes down.
I'm immortal! I'm immortal!
Easy. Whew. Tess bites it for real this time, destroying the clock and breaking the curse over the island, putting, at the very least, her friends and family, and the other myriad spirits within, to rest. Narrating a final epilogue, my hero considers returning to the island to study the place further, and oh goddammit Tess, just die and stay that way for once! Cut to credits, and perhaps the best track of the game, this bombastic swing number called Time Trapped Isle by Larry Reid and the Toot Sweet Jazz Band. It's so absolutely camp and knowingly tongue-in-cheek that it managed to totally diffuse the tension of the last act with sheer bombastic swagger. After what's felt like a marathon brawl through this macabre tribute to the worst excesses of the Roaring Twenties, it's one hell of a track to bow out on. And that is Killing Time, a tremendously creative and improbable project that could have simply languished on a console no one really cared about, and through time and love and innovation was able to become a fantastic example of what retro first-person shooters could be outside of the build engine. I would definitely say that there is room for improvement, and the game is not necessarily perfect, but there is just so much to enjoy here, so much to appreciate from a production level, that it deserves to be thought of and considered arm in arm with Blood, with Duke Nukem, with Doom, as something that was able to define a generation of shooters. You can find the game on Steam, on Good Old Games. I would honestly recommend the Good Old Games version, as that actually has patches that allow it to function properly. I feel that if you enjoy the genre of shooters, you owe it to yourself to give Killing Time a try. You will be pleasantly surprised by what it actually has to offer. This review has rambled on, and maybe not so much been a review as just a long-form outpouring of my thoughts on this game. Hopefully you found it enjoyable, and I will be back with more reliable content later. I just needed to get this out. It may not have the polish of a newer game, it may not have the polish even of games of that period. Laziness, I apologise for that, but yeah. I would honestly put Killing Time up there with some of the other, most enjoyable games I've played. I feel like I enjoy this on a level with, say, Dusk, as far as first-person shooters go. But for what the team were able to produce in the amount of time they had, it is absolutely exceptional, and I would love to see this game revisited, either a full-blown remaster or, God, I would love some kind of spiritual successor or adaptation or even sequel, just to bring me back to that heady 1920s feel of slinging six guns, flappers, speakeasies, and strange eldritch horrors from beyond the edge of our perception. But that's maybe for another time. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.